In 1997, one of the biggest and definitely strangest scandals in Hollywood history happened when Eddie Murphy's car was stopped by police and he was found with a transsexual prostitute inside. The official story of what went down that night is strange enough, but there is also way more to the story, including a Hollywood fixer who may have saved Murphy's career and a very suspicious death that many believe was murder. Eddie Murphy was the biggest movie star alive in the 1980s, but his career took a serious nosedive once the 90s arrived. But then he started releasing family comedies like The Nutty Professor and Dr. Dolittle. They were smash hits, and his career was seemingly revitalized as a family friendly movie star. Then May 2nd, 1997 happened. Murphy was out driving at 4:45 a.m. in a West Hollywood neighborhood known for transsexual prostitutes, and a trans prostitute named Atisone Seiuli got into his Land Cruiser. Police stopped the car, interrogated Murphy, and arrested Seiuli because she had an outstanding warrant. Murphy wasn't charged with a crime, and he claimed he saw a woman out walking very late at night, decided to be a Good Samaritan and offer her a ride home, and had no idea she was actually a trans prostitute. This Good Samaritan explanation was ridiculed and mocked, but Murphy claimed it was all just a big misunderstanding. But the controversy got more serious when tabloid newspapers came out with articles featuring other transsexual prostitutes who claimed they'd been with Murphy, and some went into graphic detail about what they'd done together. One trans sex worker named Shalimar Seiuli said that Murphy, quote, seems utterly obsessed with men dressed as women and the way they live. The Inquirer also had an interview with Atisone Seiuli, who said, Eddie's claim that he was giving me a lift makes me laugh. I'm a transsexual hooker, and he knew that. The articles were a complete disaster for Murphy's new family-friendly image, and he filed separate $5 million lawsuits against the tabloids, alleging that the papers had printed false statements from the transsexual prostitutes. But the papers stood by their stories, and they prepared to defend themselves against Murphy's lawsuits. And then Murphy found an unlikely ally who just might have saved him. He was a mysterious Hollywood fixer who was once one of the biggest gay porn stars in the industry, and he had a plan to save Eddie Murphy's reputation. In 2001, a man named Paul Baressi talked about his involvement in the Eddie Murphy transsexual scandal for an article titled The Bagman, which appeared in the New Times LA and was awarded runner-up for Best Hard News Story at the LA Press Club Awards. And his account of the Eddie Murphy controversy is absolutely wild. So first off, Paul Baressi is a really mysterious Hollywood figure who was a popular gay porn star in the 1980s. He also acted in a few mainstream movies, including Perfect with John Travolta in 1983, and he made headlines when he claimed he'd had sex with Travolta dozens of times, a claim he later took back. After his porn career, Baressi became a sort of shadowy, underground private investigator slash fixer in Hollywood who celebrities hired when they had a problem to take care of. And over the years, he's worked on behalf of stars like Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and Tom Cruise. The details of what exactly he did for these celebrities are a little murky. Baressi claims he would do things that ranged from investigative work to intimidation. These high-powered people came to me to solve some of these problems, Baressi said. The legal way didn't work, so they had to resort to desperate measures that go against what's considered morally correct or politically correct. And that's where I came in. When asked if he ever got violent, Baressi said, "You trying to get me arrested? I'm not going to answer that question. The key is knowing how far you can go without going too far." Baressi claimed that after reading about the Eddie Murphy scandal, he contacted Murphy's lawyer Marty Mad Dog Singer with a plan to save Eddie Murphy. Baressi would find the trans sex workers who'd talked to the tabloids by using his contacts in the porn world, then persuade them to say they were lying about their relationship with Murphy, which would ruin the credibility of the tabloid articles. Baressi said, "My role was pretty much to neutralize the transsexuals." Baressi first tracked down a transsexual ex-dominatrix named Carnal Candy, who was considered a, quote, den mother for transsexual prostitutes. Candy had been heavily quoted in the tabloid stories about Murphy. Her friends had been telling her for years about Murphy's fetish for transsexuals, and she'd heard so many stories that she was writing a book titled In the Closet with Eddie Murphy. Baressi claimed he offered Candy $15,000 to give a sworn statement that the stories she'd told the tabloids about Murphy were lies. And an IRS document she provided confirmed she'd been paid $15,000 by Singer's law firm. She openly confessed that she'd changed her story simply for the money. "We were telling lies because they were giving me $15,000, she said. I never had that much money together at one time. Baressi found two more transsexuals who'd talked to the tabloids. They too were paid to say they'd lied about their relationships with Murphy, even though they both later admitted they'd retracted their stories because they were paid off. I needed the money, one said. When someone gives you $2,500 to say you don't know someone, you just think about the money. Baressi freely admitted that he was paying the prostitutes to change their stories about Murphy. Sure, it was a payoff, he said. Baressi also knew of an Eddie Murphy lookalike whose resemblance to Murphy was so striking that he'd made a living of getting free meals, concert tickets, and hotel stays by impersonating Murphy. At Baressi's urging, many of the transsexuals swore under oath that it was the Murphy imposter they'd been with, not Murphy himself. They paid us to say it was an Eddie Murphy imposter, a trans sex worker named Valerie Gale said. I dated the man 3 different times, and I don't date imposters, honey. First time he came up in a cream-colored Rolls. He came up to our apartment and we got busy. It was definitely Eddie Murphy. But throughout all the payoffs and sworn statements and changing stories, there was one who refused the money. Atisone Seiuli, the transsexual who Murphy picked up, had turned into a minor celebrity and was prominently featured in the tabloid articles. She was offered $10,000 by Baressi to stop speaking about Murphy, but she turned it down. And her story does not have a happy ending. Roughly a year after her fling with Eddie Murphy, Seiuli's dead body was found on the pavement outside of her apartment. The official story was that she'd worked at a club until 4 a.m. and had locked herself out of her apartment. She tried to access a window to her 5th-story apartment by climbing to the roof and lowering herself to the window, but she fell to the pavement. But many don't buy that explanation at all. Many believe she was murdered. Friends of Seiuli stated that she'd been threatened after her encounter with Murphy, warnings that she, quote, keep her mouth shut. Her brother David told Globe magazine that Seiuli became paranoid and feared a hitman was following her. Carnal Candy set up a tribute site after Seiuli's death and claimed that she was murdered. Years later, a filmmaker was making a documentary on Seiuli and talked to a woman who'd been a tenant in her building. The woman told him that she'd heard a scream on the night Seiuli died, then she walked out of her door and saw a man in all black exiting Seiuli's apartment. Still, the official story is that Seiuli fell to her death and no foul play was involved. There were rumors she was writing a tell-all book and preparing to file a $1.2 million lawsuit against Murphy at the time, but this was never confirmed. And the final curious thing happened when Murphy abruptly dropped the lawsuits he'd filed against the tabloids. Nearly every sex worker interviewed for the Murphy stories had given a sworn statement saying they'd lied to the tabloids, which seemingly made winning the $5 million defamation cases a slam dunk. Instead, Murphy dropped the lawsuits, and even more strangely, he agreed to pay the tabloids legal fees, which very rarely happens in legal battles like these. The Enquirer's attorney Gerson Zweefox said, "You can't win bigger than that when you're defending against a lawsuit. To have the other guy agree to go away and pay your legal fees, it's a happy day in the tabloid wars." It's possible Murphy dropped the lawsuits because he just wanted the controversy to disappear, but it's also been speculated that the tabloids had found other transsexuals who weren't paid off who could have come forward during the trial. At any rate, the scandal mostly went away after Murphy dropped the lawsuits and Seiuli died. It's definitely one of the stranger Hollywood stories out there, and it's a very interesting glimpse into how a major celebrity scandal was taken care of behind the scenes. And of course, some believe there is much more to the story of what happened the night Seiuli died.